it's Joyce Dooley calling in with the City Chats. I'm incredibly excited about our conversation today. Joining us is Paul Vitrano from the Waev Inc. We're going to be talking about micromobility solutions, what is the impact on people's quality of life, how we can mitigate impacts to the environment, and just overall the role of EVs in smart cities. So before we get too far along, Paul, I'd love to know what makes you passionate about smart cities.
First, Joyce, thanks for having me here. I'm passionate about smart cities because I've been visiting cities all over the world for my entire adult life. Navigating the cities in a way that allows you to connect with the neighborhoods, the culture, the sites, it really enhances the experience. And a smart city approach allows you to do that. Now that I live here in Washington, D.C., I can see firsthand how successes in that area really enhance the experience. And I also can see some opportunities.
Yeah, most definitely. There's quite a bit of opportunities that we're going to get into in a minute. And I absolutely love that you're on location, by the way. Thank you so much for showing us what, your work is all about. I think that makes things really tangible and accessible for people to see like what it is that we're going to be discussing. So tell us more about Waev and the kinds of solutions that you all offer.
Sure. So Wave's an electric vehicle manufacturer based in Anaheim, California. We were formed late last year for the purpose of acquiring 3 electric vehicle businesses. Wave manufactures, markets, and distributes GEM low-speed electric vehicles like the vehicle behind me, which is street legal on roads 35 miles per hour or slower, pretty much anywhere in the country. We also make tailor-done industrial vehicles and Tiger tow tractors for airports.
Wow. So that's quite the range that you've got going on and lots of really interesting applications, I imagine, for each of these vehicle use cases. Um, why does this matter, right? Like why is mobility such an issue these days?
Mobility is an issue because it's critical to how
Mm,
people live their lives. It's an essential service or activity for people to live their lives, whether it's working, uh, buying groceries, taking your kids to school, you name it. It touches pretty much every aspect of life. And I think these days, society as a whole is becoming more aware that there are consequences depending on the mobility choices you make. Um, Obviously, there are climate impacts that we're trying to reckon with as we speak. There are safety issues associated with it, and there's also, unfortunately, unequal access to mobility. All those issues are now coming to the fore, and I think is putting a magnifying glass on the mobility choices we make.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that this is definitely a critical time to be addressing these issues. And there's a lot of interest for people to try to solve mobility, particularly like micromobility issues. So, how do EVs fit into the whole transportation mix, particularly the kinds of EVs that you're talking about?
Sure. So transportation as a whole is undergoing a transformation, and that's being driven by electrification. Uh, Obviously, electrification has a goal associated with mitigating pollution and making our environment cleaner. But electrification also has opened up the opportunity to innovate because electric motors can power all sorts of vehicles and different form factors, and we see them
Mm,
on our streets in cities day in and day out. When it comes to micromobility, what was once done by walking or pedal bicycles are now being done on stand-up e-scooters or e-bicycles. On
mm.
the other end of the continuum, our cars, trucks, and vans are undergoing probably a long-term transformation to electric, but that leaves in the middle a massive space for other modes of mobility, whether they be 2, 3, or 4. And vehicles like our GEM low-speed vehicle have a place in that ecosystem as a purpose-built vehicle for low speed and short distance applications, but in a practical way.
Yeah, I can definitely see. I mean, I can think of a couple of examples of how that might be used, but what are some of the projects that you've got going on where the electric vehicles are actually deployed in real life?
Yeah, so historically, GEM, which has been around for almost 25 years, has been a commercially focused business. So vehicles like this, we also have 2 and 6 passenger models plus a miniature pickup truck. They're
Mm,
bought by businesses, other organizations, governments to do some sort of work, whether it be shuttling people around a campus or shuttling on the street, or work applications, grounds maintenance, delivery, other things of that nature. Our largest market for GEM historically has been colleges and universities. We're on about 500 campuses around the country, some with massive deployments, like UCLA has over 200 vehicles.
Oh, wow.
And it
Yeah.
makes sense. It makes sense when you think about it, because colleges and universities were ahead of the curve on sustainability. Street legality is essential because these campuses exist amidst and through roads oftentimes. Safety
Mm,
is a must for students and staff alike. And size is really important because not only do these vehicles go on the road, but they often go on paved paths throughout the campus. So solutions like GEM have been perfect for colleges for some years. But now as we move forward, we see lots of opportunities for vehicles like GEM to be an alternative to a full-size vehicle, or some micro mobility on the other hand. You know, it's kind of that, we like to say, just right application, because you're nimble enough, leaves such a small footprint relative to curb access and wear and tear on the roads, like some of these other micro mobilities do, but it's practical. Anybody can drive it if they can drive a car. It holds full-size adults very comfortably, and you can carry cargo in good weather or bad weather alike. So different newer applications are microtransit. You know, our home city of Anaheim has really been a leader in this area, where they launched a microtransit service to leverage existing parking infrastructure and to take people to a new entertainment district where parking wasn't available. And it's been wildly successful. And the timing couldn't be better for this interview, because just yesterday, across the river, the mayor of Washington, D.C. announced a new microtransit system right here in Southwest D.C., which is really going to revolutionize how people get around. And again, an area where people live, but there's also a lot of entertainment, restaurants, and other venues that people are going to and from. So it's a great solution, and we're really looking forward to seeing more of that.
yeah. I mean, I think that this is really wonderful in so many ways. A lot of cities are trying to figure out how to make things more walkable, particularly in dense urban areas, or reduce the amount of heavy traffic, right? And traditional cars. I think that this could be a really great solution to offer that first and last mile opportunity for people, particularly if they're wanting to cut down on congestion and a bunch of other things like that. And I think it's really exciting that DC just rolled that out. It's going to be really interesting to see how that ultimately impacts the transportation mix in the community. So you have a background, right, as the senior VP and chief legal and policy officer. I'm sure you've got a bit of an idea of what kinds of policy changes might need to happen for more cities to adopt micromobility EVs as a part of their smart transportation ecosystem. So if you could speak to that a little bit, I think that would be really helpful for our viewers.
Sure, there's a few that just jump to mind. First of all, and it has a dual use of not only opening mobility, micromobility, but also helping to keep our residents safe, and that's lowering speed limits.
Mm,
You know, here in the district, the default speed limit is 20 miles per hour. They just reduced the speed on some major arteries from 35 to 25 in the heart of the city. And so that alone makes it easier for lower speed vehicles of all stripes to be able to get around. Another in this area of microtransit is really approaching the job of moving people around in new and different ways, being creative about it. You know, the days of the old fixed route, gigantic bus routes are not going away, but I think there's a realization that there's a lot of wasted resource when it comes to those vehicles. And you sometimes see them drive by and there's 2 or 3 people in a bus that fits 40. When you have these other types of vehicles that are smaller, more nimble, and can be dynamically deployed, that's a real opportunity. But it takes these public transit agencies and policymakers to open their mind to it and be able to experiment with some things. And I think another policy change that will help micromobility significantly is for cities to create these neighborhood EV hubs. You
mm.
know, part of the knock on micromobility is that, you know, it leaves vehicles strewn all over the city and the sidewalks, and it can, some people think it's a nuisance, and there's some truth to that. But cities can not only help remedy that situation, but really enhance access by having designated areas and for all vehicle types, scooters, e-bikes, GEMs, even full-size vehicles, if there was a dedicated space, some charging infrastructure in there, uh, diverse because not all of them need the same. I think it's just going to make it easier for residents, again, to use vehicles as they need them. And this way it makes it more equitable and accessible for everyone.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you mentioned those things because, there are a lot of people who tune in who work in cities who want to adopt these kinds of solutions, but don't necessarily have a good idea of how they could go about bringing that into the fold. And so this is, incredibly helpful information. And as a startup founder or as someone who is in business, like, rolling out new solutions can be really challenging. What are some of the unique aspects of getting these kinds of vehicles out onto the streets?
I think it's a recognition that you don't need the one size fits all. I mean, our culture for
Mm,
decades, probably since the advent of the car, has been automobile or full size vehicle is the one and only vehicle for most people. That's their everything vehicle. And I think if anything, this micromobility transformation that have begun a few years ago and is accelerating has shown that there are other opportunities out there. And I think it just takes education and openness to these alternatives to really find things that, again, are purpose built and designed for the application at hand. The fact of the matter is, about 50% of all vehicle trips are 3 miles or less in distance.
wow. Yeah.
And and again, communities all over the country, as part of their safety efforts, are lowering speeds. So it creates this opportunity for these smaller, less impactful vehicles. But it's our job as industry to educate people about that, and it's the job of government to be able to make policy decisions that's going to unleash the opportunities that we have in front of us.
That's really great. And I think that, especially as like this work from home transition that's happened continues, right? The people's need for long range vehicles to get them to and from all of the places that are most readily available to them is not necessary. And so that this could also provide a really great stopgap solution for those kinds of, trips and things like that. So there's a lot of potential from a personal perspective as well as from a community perspective and how people can start implementing these vehicles. I just have one more question for you before we wrap up, which is, if you could change one thing about mobility or micro mobility, what would it be and why?
It would definitely be to make it safer. I mean,
Mm,
unfortunately, we have thousands upon thousands of people who die on the roads, many more who get injured, and these a lot of these can be prevented. I mean, up until now, the countermeasures have really been around technology. It's technological assist to compensate for driver errors, technological advancements to mitigate injury or outcomes in crashes. But as I've alluded to earlier, there's a much simpler and probably equally, if not more effective solution, and that's slowing down speeds. We talked about how cities are doing that for a variety of reasons, but safety is certainly at the top of them. The sad fact is that speeding is involved in about a third of all highway fatalities, roadway
wow.
fatalities. And so going at that root cause is a way to attack the issue. And again, it's a perfect confluence of events with the advent of electrification giving rise to micromobility, which by design are lower speed. I think it has a real chance of making mobility more safe.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. This is really enlightening. I know our viewers are going to really tune into this because I don't think almost anything is hotter in discussion right now than EVs. So this is going to be really helpful for our viewers. And just thank you again for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Joyce. I'm happy to talk anytime.
Anytime. All right. Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. And tune in for our next City Chat coming up soon.